Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Morrigan and how she says we've got her all wrong. So, as you may know, the Morrigan is an Irish Celtic goddess, a triple goddess, three sisters, perhaps three separate sisters, perhaps three separate archetypes amalgamated as one goddess who is associated with battles and war and death. She is believed to screech over battlefields, heralding, the passing of certain people, a bit like a banshee. And they actually would hear her, crying out and shrieking across the battlefield. Um, she appears in the Irish annals as someone who tries to seduce Cullen, a famous hero, and when he rebuffs her, she tries to kill him. And then when he's mortally wounded, not by her, he's mortally wounded in battle, so he comes to his fated ending of his soul path. She stands guard over him, and as he lashes himself to a stone so he can die standing, she stands guard and makes sure that he comes to no harm and he can die in peace. She also appears to him and in other mythology as the washer at the ford, almost like the Norns, the threaders of fate, washing the clothes and the armor of those who are going to die in battle. When she's appeared to me as the washer at the ford, she has appeared with blood dripping from her mouth like a white crow. And she's appeared all white. She sometimes appears all black, like a raven. She's associated with the raven. But she's also a mother. The Morrigan and the Morrigan sisters, the three sisters. In fact, there's actually potentially a fourth, Nemain. They had children. Again, much like Ceridwen, the Morrigan was incarnations of real people. Again, she says these people were real. Their husbands were real. Their children were real. So much like Ceridwen, she is a mother, and will fight for her children, will defend her champions and her favorites. But she's very different from Gwyn ap Nuith in the fact that the Morrigan believes, or at least she's expressed to me, that she believes that fate can be changed. You can jump timelines, you can cause changes to be made through your own actions, which is true. If you make a different decision, if you choose to go left instead of right, a different timeline will evolve, right? A different string of events will happen. That is true. But she has a more of an active belief of intervention, of preventing things happening. And she sees nothing wrong with that. Whereas Gwyn ap Nuith is very much more of the belief that you can make your choices within your freedom of choice as a human, but then you should let those naturally occurring results play through. Whereas the Morrigan thinks that you should change it up and you should interfere more. And actually, her and Gwyn have had disagreements when I've been speaking to them over this. But I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about how the Morrigan says that she has been misunderstood in her definition as a war goddess and a goddess of cows specifically. Now, in mythology, she seems to be associated with cows because in ancient times in Ireland, cows were a sign of wealth. They were incredibly important, much like horses are to Mongolian people, in the sense that they're a food source, they're a source of milk. The more cows you have, the larger host or army you can sustain, the larger family you can sustain. And so it's not just a show of wealth and status. How many cattle you have are a show of how many people you can support. And that has much deeper familial significance in regards to how important you are in Irish culture at that time in the ancient kingdoms of Ireland. And many of the Irish annals are written about famous cattle raids and the stories around them. And stealing each other's cattle was something that the tribes and the kingdoms of Ireland did, and giving cows and cattle as honor to the High King was a common way, instead of money, of making allegiances and paying homage to people. So cows were really important in ancient Ireland and in ancient Irish kingship. So the Morrigan is linked to cows. Now, specifically to do with her archetype of the goddess Anu, um, which again is linked to again the two-third day Danoon, which are the people of Danu, which is an abundance goddess. So it may be that the Morrigan being associated with cows also has a link to the goddess Anu, who is cows being seen as abundance, being abundant, having everything that you need, because not only can you feed yourself, you can feed your people as well. So it's not just material wealth, it's familial wealth as well. But the Morrigan says that we've got her all wrong. So let me tell you about the conversation I had with the Morrigan, where she tells me that the significance of cows within her folklore is wrong. So I'm in the woods and the Morrigan appears. She appears as Bave, which is one of her protectorate appearances. The Bave is one of the Morrigan sisters of the three of the triple goddess. Again, she says she was a real person, but is now part of the Morrigan archetype. But she's a very protective role, but also a prophetic role within the Morrigan archetype. So Bave appears, and she's very keen that I understand that her link to cows is not what it's supposed to be. So Bave is seen as part of goddess of war and premonition and protection, and of crows and of cows. And she shows me a carnix. Now, if you don't know what a carnix is, it is a Brythonic war horn. They are extremely long, you know, 4, 5, 6 feet long. They're as tall as me. And they are blown through a normal sort of mouthpiece like a trumpet. They stand vertical, upright, and they would have been carried into battle upright, blown. they at the head of the carnix, they literally have a head of an animal. Sometimes it's a dragon, some sort of depiction. Sometimes it's a cow-like thing. Sometimes it's a hound-like thing. Really, not very many of them have been found, but the Romans wrote about them. And we have lots of literature, drawings, and descriptions of carnix. And again, this is something that Bave says we've got all wrong as well. If you go onto YouTube and you Google carnix being played, carnix being blown, where people have recreated a carnix and they are blowing it, they will not just be blowing one single big billow, they will be warbling it. Bave says, the Morrigan says, that's all wrong. That is not how they played it. She says that it was held upright and it was blown in one huge long billow. And then again, another huge billow. There was none of this warbling stuff that people do when they do recreations, reenactments with it. So she shows me a carnix and she plays me the sound of the carnix. And then in the distance of where I'm standing in the woods, all the cows that are in an adjoining field start to moo. But they're not mooing in a normal cow speaking to each other mooing sound when they're being moved, when they're just expressing. They start making a really particular sound. And the sound they're making is like a sort of bark, a braying sound. And it sounds exactly like the carnix. And she says to me, not like a trumpet, but empty your lungs into it. So she's talking about a really long, deep blow of the carnix, and the cows, the real cows, are making exactly the same sound. And it is a warning sound. If you live near livestock and you've ever seen anything when they're frightened, that there's a dog loose or something, they make a very particular sound. And this is the sound that she was playing to me from the carnix. Now, she says at this point, I am not the goddess of war. I am the goddess of warnings. And she says that I am not the goddess of cows. I am the goddess of the warning. So the warning sound that the cows make is what she's the goddess of, because it's associated with warnings. And this is why she shows me the carnix, right? So she says, I bray a warning the same as the carnix, which is what they blow to warn when someone is coming in the distance, a threat, or they are the threat. So you should be afraid. I am the person who warns. I am not the goddess of war, but warnings. I am not the goddess of cows, but their warnings. And then she says, the carnix gives a warning. I am the same thing. She then talks about unintended consequences. So her association with cows has been misinterpreted as being linked to abundance and the host and this sort of thing and the goddess Anu. And she's like, no, 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 no. No, no, no. It's literally the sound of the cows when they're warning is the sound of the carnix, is the sound of me on the battlefield. The carnix, my screech on the battlefield, is the carnix, the sound of incoming danger and death. So it's all sewn together with the Carnix. And then she talks about unintended consequences. And so the sound that she makes and the sound that the Carnix makes and her links to the cows, all leading to unintended consequences. And then she draws my attention to the story of the Starbringer. Now, the Starbringer is the story of a crow. It's an ancient African story. The story of a crow where the crow covets the fire that the humans have, and it steals the log from the fire because it wants the bright, shiny thing for itself, and it flies away with the fire. But as it does so, all the sparks and the embers fly off the log and create the stars in the sky. Now, obviously, Babe, the Morrigan, is associated with the raven and the crow, with corvids as well. And she talks about her role as being associated with corvids, not just as being the dark hooded one, as the one who is around when there is wars and death, but also that the story of the Starbringer, the story of the corvid, of the crow, is to do with unintended consequences. The 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 crow did not intend to make the stars in the sky. It was just focused on taking the pretty thing and flying away with it. So she then draws my attention to how she is a creator of new possibilities by interfering. And I said earlier that Gwyn sees her as interfering in the threads of fate, of disrupting. And she says, no, I am a bringer of unintended consequences, making good things from bad, that perhaps the thread didn't have on it. She talks then about Ceridwen, who I've done another video about, and she talks about the unintended consequences that Ceridwen had when she gobbled up Gwion to punish him for licking a drop of her potion. And actually, the unintended consequence was that Taliesin, the most talented bardic warrior poet in the old world, was born of her, which is not what she intended at all. So something beautiful was created from something terrible. And this is something that the Morrigan is really keen to get across, is that she's not this dark figure who is the harbinger of death. She's a goddess of warning, and she's a goddess of seeing or making good from bad, which I thought was very interesting indeed. And she also then talks about helping people through her warnings of death. So by giving people prophetic warnings of death or war, she is helping them. She's trying to make something good from bad. She doesn't understand why she's associated with terrible things, because in appearing as the crow, she's appearing as a creature who made the stars, who made something beautiful through something terrible, a theft. That she tells people of their impending death, like the washer in the Ford, so they can change it, so they can use their freedom of choice to make a different decision, to try to help them, to try to protect them. And that she's wholly misunderstood. And she then uses the evidence to me that she had come to me previously and told me there was going to be a war and I needed to prepare. Now, I mentioned this in my discussion with Joe Hickey Hall on the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast, that the Morrigan Babe appeared as the Morrigan and said that that there was going to be a war and I needed to prep, basically, and fill my freezer up and fill my food up. And so she uses this conversation with me in this next conversation to say, look, I told you there was going to be a situation where you would be disadvantaged if you hadn't have prepared. I warned you. I gave you a warning and you acted on that warning. And so you had a much nicer time. You changed your timeline. You had a much better experience. It was actually of lockdown than you would have otherwise had because you had everything you needed because of what I told you. And this is what the Morrigan is really keen for us to understand, that she may appear in a way sometimes that is frightening, but the way she appears is to communicate the gravity of what she's trying to tell us. But actually, she's trying to help us make different decisions in order to save ourselves. Now, Gwyn ap Nuith says sometimes you shouldn't. He is very against what Bave says and the Morrigan says, because he says sometimes you change things that have a ripple effect and change other timelines that perhaps don't end up being so good. But I'll make another video to talk about what Gwyn ap Nuith says is the consequences of the Morrigan's interference and how he's quite annoyed by it. But there you go. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with the Morrigan about why we've got her all wrong.